that it's just common of our time, but we understand what it means to go through hardship, to go through brokenness. And my story in that sense is not unique, because I think all of us, we have a story. Diba? We all have gone through maybe betrayal, hurt, pain, physical hardship. So we understand what it means to be broken. We understand what it means to be in the midst of adversity, or to know somebody who's going through a difficult time. So as I share today, I hope that you can relate to what I will say, and see how the same choices that I had to make can possibly be the same choices that you will make. So, let me first start off with my childhood. So I grew up, by God's grace, in a very happy home. I will just share anyway. You know what, don't worry about this presentation, because usually I don't like to use a presentation, because sometimes this happens and then I get stressed. So I'm just going to share, like we're just having a conversation, we're all ladies here. We all understand that things don't always go well in our life. So, let me start off with my childhood. So I grew up in a home where, by God's grace, my parents were Bible-believing Christians. So if you can imagine, it was a home where they taught me what it means to love God, what it means to know God. They modeled it. My dad was a self-supporting pastor. So I grew up in the church. I grew up knowing the Word of God. I grew up loving it. And so this was the kind of childhood I had. And my parents loved one another. They loved us. So it was very surprising for our family when I was a 15-year-old, that I became a victim of rape. And I'll share with you how this happened. But this is what I call how the darkness entered into our family. Because we can imagine a timeline, so everything's yellow and happy. And then all of a sudden, there was something tragic that happened. And it came out of nowhere for us, because every night my parents would pray with us for protection, for God to look out for us. So when this tragedy happened, it was so shocking. So it was about 6 p.m. on a Friday night. My parents were in Makati area teaching a Bible study. And back then, you know how old I am, there were no cell phones yet. So they were there teaching the Bible study. And what happened is at 6 p.m., somebody came to deliver rice to our home. And when this person came to deliver rice, 10 armed men followed him into the home. Now, I did not know this at the time, because I was in my parents' bedroom, which is all the way down the hallway of our house, and you can't really hear what's going on in the living room area. But what I did hear at some point was the floor was really squeaking, like rubber soles squeaking on the floor, which is uncommon in our house, because we would always go barefoot. It was wooden floors, so the sound was very unusual for that time of day, and it seemed like people were rushing. So in my heart, I think God, through the Holy Spirit, just put it in my heart to pray, because I felt like something's wrong, something's not right. So I said, Lord, if there's something happening, will you just protect us? I don't know if there is, but just please protect us. And so I said, okay, let me just look down the hallway. Maybe these fears are unfounded. So I looked down the hallway, and so this is the hallway, it's a very long hallway, and I saw this man wearing a mask running towards me. Do you know those scenes in your dream, or in those films that you shouldn't watch that are horror, where there's somebody gonna chase you or come after you? And I felt like my body was heavy. I closed the door, but I couldn't lock it, because yung door na to, it was an old Nara door. So the lock did not match anymore, the hole. So I couldn't lock it properly, so I ran into the bathroom and I just pushed it. It was one of those cheap knobs, just the push lock. So I just hid there, and I wasn't sure what's going to happen. I just knew something was very wrong. So what happened was, as I was there, I heard somebody banging on the door, and I thought maybe I would be safe there. However, he had keys. So he had the keys to the door, and finally he was trying to find the key, and then finally he was able to open the door. Now when he came in, he had a gun. He was very angry with me for hiding. He was scolding me. He was asking me where the money was, and my parents had a jewelry business before, so they had kept supplies in the house. So I showed him those things. I basically cooperated because he had a gun. I didn't know what happened to my siblings. And then what happened was, after this, he was my first, he was the guy that first violated me. And then after that, I was passed around to 6 other men. So this happened in different parts of the house, and by different guys, and most of them at gunpoint. So in my mind, I was just thinking, this is not real. This is a different level of awful. I mean, I can just understand maybe one guy, but so many, and it's just like, it seemed like they were going crazy because they were throwing everything around our house, going through all the cabinets. They were messing up our entire house. And I didn't know where my siblings were at the time. My older brother was in Subic, he wasn't home. As you know, my parents were at a Bible study. And the robbers kept wanting to wait for my parents. And I lied, I said, my parents are not here, they're in Baguio, they're not coming home. I just said, Lord, forgive me. But I was trying to be cooperative. At the same time, I was just thinking, how are we going to get out of this situation? And so then what happened was I was brought out to the living room area. I was tied up there, and I noticed that the bags of two of my friends were on the living room floor because they were supposed to come over to spend the night. And I was praying, Lord, please help them not to come over. But they did. And these were missionary friends of mine. They're white girls. And at a certain point, we were all tied together finally. But what happened was the doorbell rang. And so they said to me, the robber said to me, you go out and see what, tell them to go away. So I went out, but I thought this is an opportunity for me to tell somebody what's happening. So I went out to the gate and I saw that it was the parents of one of my girlfriends who was spending the night, one of my friends. So I said to them, I whispered, I said, there's robbers in the house. And I just ran back and I said, bye, see you later, to make it seem like, wala, nothing, it's just acting. And so I ran back in, and then the robbers got really mad at me. They said, sinabi mo. And then they said, okay, papatayin na namin kayong lahat. And so they started, cocking their guns, and my selfish prayer at the time was, Lord, can I be first na lang? Because I don't want to see like a mass murder of my family and my friends. And what happened was they took a hostage instead. The person who came to deliver rice, they took him and they escaped that way and left. And the person who delivered rice was actually my father's cousin. So, a few moments later, we see people surrounding our house because it was glass, you could see outside. And we thought the robbers came back. But God actually sent missionary friends to come and rescue us. So my friends and I were taken to a safe house. The rest of my siblings stayed in the house, waited for my parents to come home. And during this time, we were discussing, what happened to you? What did they do to you? So my friends were also violated. And we were thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to move past this? What are we going to tell our parents? So while I was waiting in that safe house, it was a house of one of our friends, my parents finally came home from Bible study. When they first came to our house, they saw all the police cars, and they thought somebody died. Because it was so unusual. There's so many police cars, people running around. But another friend of our family told them, your family is safe, your children are safe, but something happened to Joy. So they went to see me at this safe house. So I'm waiting there, and I went out to greet them at the gate. And I tell you, that was the hardest thing for me, because to tell my parents what happened to me, just to say the word rape, I was so ashamed, I was so embarrassed, and I felt so dirty. And I didn't know how to say it because I know that my parents had protected me all my life. I never had a boyfriend, I never kissed anybody. That was my first sexual encounter, and it was violent, and it was disgusting, and it was such a violation. And so, as a daughter, I didn't know how to tell my mom and dad. But I told them anyway, and I said to my mom and dad, I said, Mom and Dad, I was raped. And they embraced me, they cried with me, and then we had to decide now, as a family, even with my friends, how are we going to move forward from this tragedy? My parents also had to go check on the house, my siblings, my mom stayed with me when my dad went, and the whole house was ransacked. Praise God, none of my younger sisters were violated, but it was a major, major tragedy in our family. And to think that my parents were teaching the Bible that night. So you can imagine, not just for me, But for them, here we are, followers of Jesus. We loved him. We love him. And yet, he allowed this to happen. And so, in the aftermath, and I'm going to pause here for a little bit because I think maybe many of you, or maybe some of you, are at this point where you've gone through something so difficult. You can't even imagine how you even made it this far maybe, and you're wondering, Lord, how do I move forward? And you're at a crossroad. And I felt this way. I was here and I had to ask myself, am I still going to believe in God? That he exists, that he is good, that he has a plan for my life? Or am I just going to say, you know what, forget it. He did not protect me. He did not look out for me. So I'm just going to, just live my life the way I think makes sense. But I said, if I don't follow God, where will I go? I have known God all my life. I read about him in my Bible. I've known him from Sunday school, from what my parents taught me, from my own personal experiences. And I said, if I forsake God now, where will I go? What is the alternative? And I think all of us, you see, you come to a point where you have to make that decision on your own. Is God really going to be your God? Not the God of Lighthouse Community Fellowship, but your personal God. And God will bring you to that point because he doesn't want us to settle for just a religious relationship with him. Does that make sense? He wants it to be that we understand how much he loves us and that he has a plan for us and that we can know him very personally and intimately. So I had to make 3 choices. And perhaps this is where you're at, and I hope that this will encourage you. But for any of us to experience real healing, we have to make certain choices. Because nobody can force us to heal. People can bring us to counseling, people can talk to us, people can say, read your Bible, but this is not something we can delegate. The choices we have to make about God, about what we will believe in, what will we cling on to. And so the first thing I had to decide was, I will choose to believe that God is good. And sometimes you don't feel it in your heart, right? But you will say, Lord, and that's what faith is. Because sometimes we think, it's easy in the Philippines. Everyone has faith because we grew up in a Christian nation, supposedly, and our faith is not challenged in the same way that it is in persecuted countries. But this is the point where you have to say, is this going to be a faith that I own? Even if I don't feel like it, even if it doesn't seem clear now. And so I tell a lot of people, sometimes we want the why, right? We always want the why answer. Why did this happen? Why did you allow it? But for me, all I needed to know first was the who. Lord, if I know who you are, then the why can wait. And I will trust that you are good, that you love me, and you have a plan for my life. And how do we know this? Well, first, he tells us, right? In Romans 8:28, this is my life verse, but God calls us all things to work together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. So if you are a child of God today, this verse tells you that what? He causes all things, not some things, not only the good things, all things, even the bad, even the worst things, to work out for our good. If we really love him, if we really cling to him, if we will follow him. And he has a purpose. And then next, I'm a mom, right? And I will show you my family later. I'll show you a photo of them. But I can't even give one finger for somebody, one finger of one of my children to donate it or say, okay, I will donate, I will cut off part of my child's finger, and if this will make you healthy, or this will make you well again, or this will make you happy. I'm sorry, as much as I care about you all and I love you with the love of Christ, I cannot imagine doing that to my child. But here is God. And he gives the body of his son for us completely to die for us. What kind of love is that? Doesn't even seem like a rational love. And sometimes I think it's so irrational it's hard for us to believe it. But when we are tempted to ask God, why did you do this to me? We should first ask, Lord, why did you die for me? And if you could die for me, then you must really love me. Because you understand pain also, you understand suffering, and you wanted to rescue me from the penalty of sin. So I chose to just believe, okay, God, you're good. I will trust you. But if you say to God, I'm going to trust you, I'm going to keep following you, then he's going to also ask you to make certain choices, right? Like the choice to forgive, for example. And When I understood how much God loves me, like he says that in John 3:16, I'm sure you all know that. What does this mean then? That if I were the only person on earth and I had sinned, God would have died for me and paid the penalty of my sins. And before I used to think, may levels yan. So, mga murderer, that's a real sinner, right? Then you have people who maybe commit a crime like robbing other people, raping people, stealing, those kinds of things. Those are bad sins. But maybe a little lie here and there, or I wasn't so nice to my sibling. Maybe that's not so bad. But you know what? When the Bible says, "For all have sinned," is it there? Sorry, Anne. Okay. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That means that in God's eyes, sin is sin. There's no, that's more sinful, this is less sinful. Because He's a holy God, we're all the same. Now, are there different consequences for different kinds of sin? Of course. But in His eyes, we have all fallen short. So when I understood this is when I understood what grace is. I don't deserve also to be forgiven by God. Because just like those people who raped me, actually before God, we all look the same. We are all sinners. It's hard to imagine, right? Because if you've been betrayed by somebody and it's so painful, in your mind you're going to say, what? Magka-level lang kami? Diba? What he did to me was much worse. How can we be at the same level? Well, it's because our standard is not one another. It's God. And before God and His standard of holiness, we all fall short. We are all sinners. So when I understood this, I realized, God, you died for me also. So who am I not to forgive the people who have hurt me? And that's what allowed me to forgive. It wasn't because I'm such a great person that, wow, yes, sure, I will forgive. It wasn't because of me. It's because I understood what it means to be forgiven. And I think unless we understand what it means to have been given mercy and to receive forgiveness, it's very hard for us to extend this to others. Because we'll always feel like, I deserve better, or what they did was so bad, I would never do that. We even say, maybe we were in the garden, we wouldn't have eaten the apple. You know what, I think all of us we would eat. It's not an apple. It's not an apple. It's a fruit. No, that's from comics, right? It's not an apple. But I think all of us, if we've been in the garden, we all have that propensity to disobey God, to choose to want to do things our own way, to want something better than what God offers. So we all have the Eve gene, as I like to call it. So we all have that disposition towards sinfulness, towards selfishness. So when I finally understood that, that's when I realized, okay, God, with the forgiveness you've extended to me, I will choose to forgive. So far, I've talked about two choices. The first is the choice to believe who God says He is, that He is good, that He is loving, that He has a plan for me, that He has a plan for you, that He is sovereign. And second, that I will choose to forgive. And I tell you, in our country, di ba mahilig tayo sa mga drama. So sometimes when I'm counseling women, I said, can you forgive? And the person will say, I don't feel like it yet. I will, when I feel like it. Let me tell you something. That feeling, really, a lot of times it won't come. And what happens is, you become so full of anger and bitterness that you also start wounding not just yourself, but the people around you. Can you imagine a coffee cup that's so full to the brim? Let's say that coffee cup represents our hearts, and it's full of anger and bitterness. Punong-puno, because we're not being forgiving people. So what happens? Konting ano lang, konting galaw, what happens? It spills over, right? Do you sometimes feel like, how come? I love my husband. I think I married the best guy God could have possibly chosen for me. I praise God for him. For me, he's the most handsome, most amazing. But are there days when we don't like each other? Yes. Right? In fact, sometimes he says to me, honey, I love you so much, but right now I don't like you. Because I do things that annoy him, and I feel the same way at times. Now, if we continue on in our marriage, not forgiving one another on a daily basis, what's going to happen? You know what happens with anger is you can't just have a little bit in your heart. The nature of anger is such that you keep a little bit of it, it becomes a lot. and it pushes out love. And this happens in many marriages, in many relationships. And so we've had to learn through the years also to forgive one another, to keep short accounts with one another. And so that's why I can look at him with new eyes, because God's mercies are new every morning, and still feel that I really love this man, and I would marry him all over again. Do you feel the same way, too? Just checking. I put him on the spot. So, the Bible tells us, right, none is righteous, not even one. And it also says that we were rescued from the domain of darkness and transferred into the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So this is one of the things that our family had to do, really forgive the people who hurt us, that really could have destroyed our family and our faith. And I know my parents, they also had their personal journey. You see, when a person goes through tragedy, because we're all connected, right? Somehow, it doesn't just affect the person who goes through the tragedy firsthand. It affects everybody on the periphery. You're a parent, so you see your child suffer. You also have many questions. So even my parents, with their faith, they had to decide, what will we really believe? So we did this collectively as a family. But what also helped me to heal is to realize that this is not my story. That this is something that God allowed for his purposes, for his glory. In the Bible, when the disciples saw a blind man, and they questioned, they asked Jesus, why was this guy born blind? Is it because he sinned or his parents sinned? Because in their mind, they're trying to understand this concept of suffering and tragedy in this world. And what did Jesus say? Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. So this comforts me because I realize what I went through, it's not for my sake, it's not to bring attention to me. This is God's story, and he's writing the story of your life, of my life. And so what I have to do, what you have to do is be willing to tell your story. It doesn't have to be a perfect story, and I will share with you why as we get towards the end. But I had to realize this as I was thinking about, what are we going to do? Are we going to tell people? Are we going to share it as a testimony? And you know, the day that we shared it as a testimony in our congregation, God gave me a beautiful song. And nobody knew yet that we were going to share it, but the song was, we're marching on with hearts courageous, we'll follow. Follow anywhere you want us to. And should you lead us where the battle rages, Lord will fight, Lord will march with hearts courageous after you. What does that mean? We'll keep going, no matter what happens, because our eye is on Jesus. And the Bible says that he is the author and perfecter of our faith. Why does the Bible say author? Because he's writing the stories of our lives. He's writing your story. It's not yet done. We're still in the middle of it. We have to wait till God gives us the ending that he wants us to have. Because sometimes what we want is, kami na lang magsusunod, ha? Lord, thank you. I gave you the pen, but you wrote some parts in here that I don't like. So let me just erase that. Anyway, there's friction pens now. You know, friction ball pen. You can erase. My goodness, we needed that when I was in school. So you can erase now, and I will take over from here now, because I have kind of an idea of how I want this to end, how I want this to play out. You know, I want to marry this kind of person, and I want to take vengeance on this person. So give me that pen, thank you, and I will take it from here. But we have to understand that this is not our story. This is God's story. And I was in Brazil, and one of the pastors there, he had a son who was actually drinking under the influence, and this son, he had a friend beside him in the car. The son did not die, but his friend died because he was drinking under the influence when he had the accident. And I want you to look at this next slide, and I'm going to ask you a question. What do you see? How many of you say you see a black dot? Don't worry, it's not you don't run around. It's not a test. So, most of us will see the black dot. But what else do you see? There's so much white paper. So think of this now as the canvas of your life. A lot of times we fixate so much on the things that we have done. Maybe the mistakes we've made, the things that have been done against us, and that becomes our focus, that we cannot see anymore, that there's a grander canvas that God sees, that He's planning to paint and design so beautifully. And this is what the father, that pastor father, told his son. Son, you have to stop focusing on the black dot. God has forgiven you, you have repented. It's time to move on and realize that God has yet to write the rest of your story. And so, I wanted to show you, remember I showed you colors at the beginning. The first slide I showed you was my childhood, right? The next slide I showed you was when the darkness entered. And then after that, I showed you the aftermath. Do you know that this is a painting that I painted that is hanging in our home? You'll see it. If you go to the next slide, you'll see it. I think I'm supposed to click this myself, right? No, there. So this is a painting that I've painted in our home to illustrate how God takes us maybe from, He lets us, this is like a journey with Him. So at times when you feel like, oh, everything's going well, everything's going okay, then suddenly there's an interruption. Like a black dot in the timeline of our existence, and it's a confusing period. And yet if you could really see that, because I can't see the color there, you see that there's red, because you know what? Jesus is always with us. He is always with us. And He will replace that confusion with beautiful new memories. But I have a circle there because I want that to represent eternity. If we just focus on this life and we say, yes, okay, I believe that God is good. Yes, I believe that I have to make the choice to forgive. Yes, I will use my story to glorify God. We have to understand that our best life is yet to come. God has the best life in store for us if you are a Christ follower, that He has eternity for us with Him. And so this is what I tell people. If we just focus on this life, it's hard. It's hard to stay in a marriage where you have been betrayed multiple times if our focus is earthbound, right? Because you're thinking, what's in it for me? You mean I have to sacrifice and put up with this person? But you know what? Praise God, walang marriage sa heaven. Not for me. I want to be at least the neighbor or roommate of my husband. But I know for some women, it's so hard for them to stay in a marriage where they're constantly betrayed. But that's why we have to think of our life not just in terms of our present time here on earth, but in terms of eternity, that the best is yet to come. And what did Christ say? He said, the reality is we live in a broken world. It's a sinful world. But He says what? Take heart because I have overcome the world. And there's a beautiful story of Beethoven. You can research it. I hope it's not one of just those fantasy stories that is on the internet, but I think it is true. But it's an illustration nonetheless. When he composed his Ninth Symphony, Overjoyed, he was already dead. He was already dead. And when you're a conductor, you're facing the musicians. You're not facing the audience. So he's conducting it. He can't even hear if it's done properly, but he just knows in his heart, because he was the composer of it. And when it was finished, he received a standing ovation, but he couldn't see. He couldn't hear. So he turns around, he realizes it, but when he's about to die, he was at peace. You know why? He said, I will hear in heaven. And I think that's what we always have to hope in, that whatever was taken away from us here, whatever we have lost, God will restore infinitely in heaven. Recently, I went through another trial because I thought, in my heart, I thought I graduated already. I said, Lord, I thought I graduated already from these major trials in my life. But last year, I almost died because after I gave birth to my sixth child, I had a very huge mass growing inside me. It was about 13 cm. And after I gave birth, I was in so much pain. I told my husband, I've never said this, but I said to him, I'm going to die because of the pain. And so when we did the ultrasound, you couldn't even see my uterus anymore. I'm so glad this is a women's conference. I can talk about uterus, ovaries, cervix. Okay na. Sorry, Pastor Joe. My husband is used to it already. So, they said, this was Christmas Eve, the 24th. They said, don't worry, it'll just be a laparoscopic surgery. You'll be in and out in 2 hours. All of December 25, I was having blood transfusions because I was anemic. That's what I did on Christmas Day. I realized, God, you gave your blood for me, because here I am on the bed, getting transfusions. December 26th, I had my operation, and I woke up 10 hours later. And I had a doctor friend come in, and I said, what happened? It's so late. And she said, Joy, it was a very complicated surgery. This doctor used to be the head of the OB-GYN department of St. Luke's QC. When she said it was complicated, in my mind, I'm thinking, for her to say that it was complicated means it must have been pretty major. And apparently it was. And because I was knocked out the whole time, I didn't know that they kept taking parts out of my body. So they had to take out my uterus, my ovaries, my cervix, part of my intestine and my rectum, and my appendix. So the doctors kept going to my husband, presenting my body parts, saying, so we had to take this part out. We need you to sign a waiver because there's something else we need to take out, if it's okay with you. Of course, he has no choice, because if they don't take it out, I'm not going to live. So he would sign it, but he's thinking, what's going to be left of my life? He just wanted me to be okay. And so when I saw him, I came out of the recovery room, and I'm being wheeled out, and I'm looking up at him, but I am so delirious, because I've never been on so much anesthesia in my life. I gave birth all the months to my children, up to my 6. I never had any cut. And so God has a sense of humor. He knows how to humble us, okay? I'll get to that in a second. But I'm looking at my husband, I'm like, hon, what happened? He's like, I'll tell you later. I said, by the way, you still have to preach on Sunday. Okay, I was telling him, you still have to preach on Sunday, you know? I didn't realize all that had happened to me. So, I finally realized when I was in the hospital room and it was explained to me more thoroughly. And I broke down, because I said, how could this happen? I'm a healthy person, I exercise, I eat the right food. How did this happen? What happened? And I really had my whys all over again. And this is when I finally, when I went through rape, that was one thing, that was emotional wounding, so much emotional wounding. But this one was very physical in nature. The recovery was very hard. I had an infant that I had to take care of, plus I had to recover. I also homeschooled my children. So I just looked at 2019 and I thought, there's no way I can survive this year. I do not know how I'm going to get through this year. And God brought me to a place of absolute brokenness and dependence upon Him, where I knew that there's no way I can get through my year unless I am so dependent on Him and trusting Him for each day. And I think, looking back now, I told my husband, I said, that this was the hardest year of my life, but I would declare it as the best year of my life. Not because everything went well, but because in light of eternity, which I just shared with you, everything falls into perspective. This body, this world, it's not our home. And we are so, excited to hold on to it, to preserve it, to bellify it, whatever. She's our friend. She's got a great business. But the truth is, we can't preserve this physical body forever. And when I saw the scars on my body, when I had to deal with effects of surgical menopause and intestinal problems up to now, because it's so slow, I think it takes 1 or 2 weeks for my body to digest things. So the difficulties, I still struggle with them. But I keep thinking to myself, this is not my home. Lord, you have a better place for me, and I'm going to look forward to that. And this body is going to fit anywhere. So, Lord Jesus, come soon so I can have my new body. Because I don't want to have to do anything, right, to try and preserve it, because I realize in the grand scheme of eternity, our time is so short. Okay lang, kung pumangit tayo dito, basta maganda sa heaven. Diba? Would you rather you fix everything here, you're not even recognized in heaven? No! So, I want to share with you though that when you do follow God, He is also good to you even here on earth. I want you to see a photo of my family. Before I get to that, because I got so caught up in this added part that I put. Have you ever heard of this art? Kitsune. Now, I heard this verse from Jodi Santa Maria when she gave her testimony. And it was such a beautiful description of how God takes us from brokenness to something beautiful. the more broken pieces we have, the more they need to put what? Gold to put it together. And then the more it becomes valuable. So think about your life. The more broken pieces you have, the more we have to be put together by Christ so that He shines through. Because who's the gold in our life? Jesus! So the more broken you are, praise God. You know why? Because God is going to get all the more glory when He puts us together. So, I want to show you a photo of my family. I think this is it now. There we go. So, has God been good to me here on earth? Yes. Imagine, victim of rape, pero ang dami na. Diba? Surgical menopause, pero 6 na. So, God's timing was perfect. And I think, maybe in His divine way, He said, you know what, I really have to let this happen because if not, you're going to keep on having babies. Because I told my husband the other day, wouldn't it be nice if we had a 7? I tell you, God has given me such a bad memory that it's so hard in the first few months, I forget everything, and then I start thinking, it would be nice to have another baby again. So he said, no, that's it. I just want you to have 6 so far, unless we adopt. We don't know. We don't know God's plans. But I'm sharing this with you because you cling to God on earth, to His promises, until they come true for you. You say, God, I will not let you go. Remember Jacob when he was wrestling with God, and he clung onto God. He said, no, you bless me first. So we do the same with God, because He delights to bless us. He said, He rewards people who believe in Him, who have faith that He is a good God. So I said to Him, I wrote it in my journal the other day, God, I will cling to you. I will hope in you until your promises for me come true, even in this life. Because I know you want to bless me, but I have to make sure that my heart is aligned with you, that I'm really following you. So, look at that. And I married the most amazing man who loves God, and he was willing to marry me despite what I went through. So I just said to him, honey, sorry, but medyo